What do you think of the culture here at SPD, especially in regards to women working here? Do you think that's a welcoming place, a fair place to work at?
Yeah, we really are trying to make sure that we make this a welcoming place. I've heard from a lot of the officers, not only female, people of color, and just our overall climate, that we have a lot of things that we can work on, and we can get better. And so that's what we're doing. When this initiative came about, 30 by 30, in 2021, I immediately signed on and wanted to make sure that everything that we do as a department is making this an inviting department.
And exactly, the initiative 30 by 30, the hope is to have by 2030 have about 30%, right, of women sworn in or whatnot. What's the current status, and do you think that goal is actually obtainable?
We're going to strive to make sure that, we do everything we can to attain that goal. Not many police departments are attaining that. They're not even coming close to attaining that goal. In fact, 40% of 18,000 police agencies don't have a female in their department. And, right now I've looked across the country and actually across the world. Iceland is one of the few departments that actually has met that demand. But many of them aren't. It's a little bit of a different job title because many of them are not armed police officers. So we really have to make sure that, it's not just the culture, but it's also the job. What are we asking our people to do, and really be able to make that a very good department?
And what's the current status of that number? Obviously we want 30%, but where are we looking at, what are we looking at here in 2024?
Yeah, we have 151 officers that are female. And, we're always, looking for more and more female officers. We roughly have about 950 deployable officers. That doesn't mean that there aren't people in the academy, aren't people in their stages, what we call phase 2 of their FTO phase. But we have roughly about 151 that are actually sworn police officers.
That are women, obviously, and then 950 is the total men and women, if I'm not mistaken?
That are deployable officers. Okay. And then we have roughly over 400 total female that are also part of our civilian staff as well.
And back to the report that was just released on Friday, some of the trends they were saying or themes were masculine culture, expectations for women, double standards, generational distinction, pregnancy and childcare, promotion and leadership, exclusion, and pigeonholing. Those are the 5 big themes. When you hear those themes, what are your thoughts with some of these women bringing up their frustrations or concerns with the department?
Well, I actually want to thank the men and women, or really the women of this department, to be willing to be vulnerable and come forward with a lot of those issues. Because you wouldn't see that typically in an EEO report, because many of those don't get reported. So actually being able to use our focus groups and being able to understand the true issues of where people feel is really important. And I wanted to make sure that I ordered that, not only ordering this report, but ordering the process of really increasing the department. So that's really what our focus is really we have 3 phases of this 30 by 30. We had the data phase, really just understanding what the data looks like. Number 2, it's this focus group, which is really getting the input from our females about what's going on and what they feel. And then the third part is really figuring out how do we actually improve that. And that is that's what we're focused on now.
And again, when you hear some of those claims too, how does that make you feel, especially being the chief, when you hear that there are employees, especially women within the department, that feel frustrated and uncomfortable at times, and I've experienced certain things within the department?
I think it should be a shock to everybody, but it isn't. And I know as a person of color growing up in this department, there's things that I've also had to endure throughout my career. And so for me, it's like that's the reason why it's so important to use these focus groups to get this information out and being able to understand what truly people are feeling. So that's really I wish I could say that it's a shock, but we also have you think about all these different professions across throughout the world. And many of them have the same issues. There's not many professions that you're not going to have similar issues in that dynamics. And so we've got to do a better job, and that's the reason why the department's really taken a lead.
and again, doing a better job. Exactly. What is the department doing moving forward to address, kind of those 5 themes? What is the plan in place? How are we going to address some of these concerns?
Well, you got to think about hiring. So we've got to, we've got to be able to advertise and focus our advertising to women, and being able to cater it. We also have to make sure our policies and practices are, identifying things such as, having, when somebody comes back from maternity, what are things that would make it a very viable environment for them? So having the ability to nurse in each of our precincts, or have certain units that they're able to go to that allows them to have a work adjustment that creates that environment. We also want to make sure that we also have a part-time program of what we call a part-time police officer program. Do we need to revamp it because a lot of people haven't utilized it as much as we need to? And then just trying to figure out what those, even though we have these things, like sometimes they're not being used the way we need them to be used. So what are those hurdles? And then how do we actually fix those issues?
And I have to ask, too, just your reaction. There's at least 2 big lawsuits from prominent women within the department, talking about gender bias and even claiming, you may have a history of misogyny. I mean, what's your reaction to those lawsuits or those claims?
Well, the whole claim of having a history of misogyny is just factually untrue. And there's no investigation that's ever been out there, and I've done everything I can to better serve. In fact, most of my units that I've actually been a leader have had a majority of women in the unit, and we still have good friendships to this day. And so, I think that is wanting to make sure. Like my command staff is actually almost half of them are female. So my executive command, people will say, "Oh, you only have one person that's female." It's not true. And so I think that when you look at these lawsuits, while I know I can't talk about pending litigation, I know some of the facts of some, at least some of those lawsuits will come out. And I think when you look at Detective Cookie, she's been a phenomenal employee, and so that's a whole different type of case. And I think she has done amazing amount of work in the community. And I was one of her supervisors, and we've had a good friendship and close. And it's sad when I hear some of the things that she's experienced throughout her career, and you want to figure out how to fix that, and that's the reason why I'm pushing our initiative by 30 by 30 to help fix that issue.